In a world where shadows loom larger than light, the unseen puppeteers of human behavior wield an alarming power over us. Mind armor, defending against Machiavellian behavior, is not merely another communication guide. It serves as an essential toolkit designed to unveil the intricate psychological tactics employed by manipulators. As we delve into the unsettling realms of dark psychology, you will confront the unsettling truth. Knowledge is your greatest defense against the insidious influence that seeks to dictate your thoughts and actions. Prepare to strengthen your emotional resilience and reclaim autonomy in a landscape riddled with deceit. Mind Armor, Defending Against Machiavellian Behavior, written and published by Stealth Psychology. Chapter 1: The Face of Manipulation. Imagine a vibrant social gathering where laughter dances through the air, and camaraderie seems illuminated by the warmth of genuine connection. Among the crowd, a charming individual captures everyone's attention, a master of conversation, effortlessly twisting words and emotions in ways that feel natural yet oddly persuasive. As the night unfolds, you notice subtle shifts in the dynamics. Friends pivot towards this captivating character, while others, once engaged, begin to withdraw. Little do they realize that what seems ordinary is, in fact, a performance marked by manipulation and calculated intent. The enchanting figure in the center harbors a singular goal: emotional control, entwining the group in a delicate web of dependency where influence reigns supreme. Yet, as the victims unwittingly invest their trust, they remain blissfully ignorant of the invisible chains tightening around them, myopic to the plot that gradually unfolds. Manipulators thrive in the blurred lines between genuine connection and psychological exploitation, scheming not just for moments, but for lasting power. In this ambivalent space, they study their targets, identifying vulnerabilities and insecurities, weaponizing them to facilitate compliance. A knowing glance, a well-timed compliment veiled in flattery, or an apparently harmless suggestion all serve as gateways to deeper authority. With an uncanny ability to discern weaknesses, they exploit these emotional tributaries, leading their victims to places they never intended to go. Victims often regard these actions through a veil of affection or acceptance, unable to decipher the underlying motives masked by charm. This is where the darkness thrives. It operates in the archives of human emotion, leveraging trust against its own bearers. As the manipulation deepens, the scope and reach of the manipulator's influence increase, creating environments where emotional entanglement becomes a norm. Financial exploitation might emerge as seemingly gentle reallocations of resources disguised as assistance. Under the facade of amiable relationships, users weave meticulous layers of influence that strip autonomy, threatening the very fabric of identity to maintain control. The self-doubt introduced amid the conceptual cloak prevents victims from recognizing signs of betrayal and deceit. Instead, they hold on to the facade of positivity, inadvertently colluding with their own entrapment. It becomes a cycle that is difficult to break. Individuals may rationalize their circumstances, chalking up experiences to misunderstandings or simple miscommunications. This denial insulates the manipulator and reinforces the power they hold. It becomes a shadowy facade that most navigate blindly. Awareness turns elusive, and with each passing moment under their spell, the addictive grasp forces the victims deeper into a quagmire of compliance. The ultimate irony is that by valuing connection and trust, victims live a reality that undermines those very ideals, ensnaring themselves in a psychological tug-of-war that renders them powerless in recognizing or responding to their endangerment. Time and again, considerations emerge about why individuals willingly succumb to manipulation, allowing the darkness to seep into their lives. The answers often lie not in a lack of intelligence or awareness, but rather in the seductive nature of trust itself. Understanding the face of manipulation is crucial as it unfolds in myriad forms, often cloaked in what appears to be warmth and camaraderie. Understanding this reality is the first step towards harnessing one's own power and dismantling invisible chains that bind them. Only then can the path to emotional resilience become clear, marking a decisive beginning in reclaiming control over one's reality. The insidious grip of manipulation on emotions and decision-making can distort perceptions and eclipse rationality. Research indicates that emotional states profoundly influence the decision-making process. Individuals ensnared in manipulative dynamics often experience heightened vulnerability, making them susceptible to external influences. For example, a case study involving a business employee shows how subtly crafted words from a charismatic boss led to poor financial decisions. The employee, caught off guard by compliments and coaxed into feeling valued, was ultimately persuaded to invest in a dubious project that would cost them their savings. This vivid example illustrates how music to the ears can drown out the instinct to question, emphasizing how emotional appeal takes precedence over logical reasoning. At the heart of this emotional tug-of-war lies an acute alteration of self-esteem. Manipulators frequently employ tactics that lead victims to question their worthiness, promoting an atmosphere where validation feels sparse. The constant reinforcement of doubt creates an environment where individuals no longer trust their judgment. A poignant case comes to mind involving a woman who found herself in an emotionally abusive relationship. Her partner frequently made casual but stinging remarks undermining her intelligence, convincing her through a systematic disassembly of confidence that she was lucky even to have his attention. Over time, her self-destructive belief system took hold. This adversarial relationship not only eroded her self-esteem, but also colored her perception of love. What once sparkled with joy now pulsated with an echo of disdain. Study after study underscores how this manipulation impacts emotional health, showing high correlations between low self-esteem and continued compliance with manipulative behaviors. As people find themselves ensnared by these influences, their relationships also languish. Trust becomes a currency exchanged for control. Social circles shrink as manipulative figures latch on to weaker bonds, keen to replace genuine connections with dependencies. Research in the field of social psychology highlights how manipulated individuals abandon their core relationships in favor of those driven by conflict or need. A recent study illustrated how individuals often look to their closest acquaintances for support, yet find themselves distanced from those very people when entangled in manipulative situations. The shifting loyalties often compound feelings of loneliness, wounding not just the victims but also collateral damage, their lost friendships. Within this distorted landscape, those victimized often grapple with disillusionment, leading to a perilous internalization of manipulation-encoded messages. Justifying unfavorable decisions begins to feel normal, echoed in the scripts consistently repeated by manipulators. The bend in reality sharpens as individuals start exhibiting rifts in self-awareness. They misplace clarity for dependence, thinking their identities are intertwined with those who manipulate them. Research shows that while numerous routes lead to unhealthy relationships, the intertwining of self-worth with external validation stands out as a primary thread in psychological exploitation. Recognizing these urgent dynamics is essential. By learning only by awareness can one start to navigate the murky waters of manipulation inflicted upon their emotional landscape. The realization that veiled tactics are designed to disrupt bliss rather than cultivate it is a profound discovery every individual ought to embrace. Awareness, however, is the key to unlocking potential, avoidance of the hidden traps manipulators set. The next section will unveil the crucial warning signs that often weave through interpersonal dynamics unnoticed, allowing readers to sharpen their defenses against these psychological predatory instincts. Manipulators possess an uncanny ability to identify their targets, often honing in on individuals who display specific vulnerabilities. They engage in a quiet form of observation, picking apart behaviors and characteristics until they uncover the threads that can be pulled. These vulnerabilities may stem from emotional insecurities, unfulfilled needs for validation, or even social anxieties. Once a target is identified, the manipulator sets the stage, wielding charm and charisma while subtly crafting a faux bond to appear accessible and relatable. In this intricate dance, the manipulator's keen prowess quietly assesses the emotional landscape of their target. Consider the illustrative case of Andy, a college freshman navigating a daunting new environment. Eager to fit in and establish a place within his peer group, he becomes the ideal mark for a seasoned manipulator who notices his desperate yearning for acceptance. First, the manipulator draws Andy in through shared interests and exhilarating experiences, seemingly providing him with the validation he craves. The initial phase gains momentum as compliments such as, "You're really talented," or "I appreciate your uniqueness," empower Andy's self-worth. However, as the excitement mounts, so too does the manipulative undertone. Trust is constructed with hooks mean to ensnare. This stage often exhibits what experts describe as the foot-in-the-door technique, wherein small requests gradually escalate in magnitude. The manipulator might initially approach Andy, suggesting he partner with them on a project. This humble overture feels comforting and inclusive. However, as Andy commits to the project, the demands increase steadily. By the time they are coordinating efforts, he finds himself doing the bulk of the real work, burdened and worn, but hesitant to withdraw. The relentless cycle turns familiar. The manipulator's nature transforms into an emotional leech, depleting Andy's fulfillment while offering fleeting praise and affirmation. Throughout the saga, subtle psychological shifts manifest, causing internal confusion. Andy oscillates between exhilaration and disappointment, his emotions tied to the whims of a powerful figure he unwittingly idolizes. As manipulative behaviors intensify, he begins rationalizing away the discomfort caused by the inconsistencies in their relationship. Remarkably, it becomes easier for Andy to believe the manipulator's manufactured reality. Traits he initially celebrated are reframed as flaws, and his choices begin to accommodate the manipulator's evolving demands. In such moments, individuals frequently experience cognitive dissonance, which plagues their ability to evaluate their situations critically. This need for social approval and connection fosters an emotional blindness, amplifying potentials for exploitation. As the problematic patterns solidify, targets often turn to justifications for their suffering. Andy might tell himself, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just try harder." In reality, these manipulative engagements feel akin to a bewitched incantation, as the accumulation of cognitive distortions creates an oppressive atmosphere where reliance thrives. Individuals must confront the alarming recognition that acknowledgement of manipulation is explicitly linked to self-awareness. The analysis of these identification techniques underscores that every strike against a person's autonomy is rooted in an understanding of psychosocial interaction. The key is recognizing how manipulators cultivate these toxic environments so that progressively layered manipulative behaviors blindside their targets. By shining a light on their methods, we begin to dethrone their power. Understanding the ways manipulators find and seize their targets is a foundational first step toward resistance. It equips individuals to extricate themselves from cycles of influence and enhances their vigilance regarding interpersonal dynamics. The next part of this journey will delve into the escalation of control and delve into how victims find themselves entrapped within vicious cycles. This understanding becomes paramount, creating not just a cloak of awareness, but also a shield against manipulation. As uncovered truths replace ignorance, the path to reclaiming agency solidifies, preparing you for the challenges that lie ahead. Chapter 2: Shadows of Deception. Picture this. Sarah, an ambitious professional in her early 30s, is excited about a new project at work that promises to take her career to new heights. Over the weeks leading up to it, she forms an admirable working relationship with her team leader, Mike, a seemingly supportive figure whose charm and charisma immediately attract her. As tasks unfold, Sarah grows reliant on his guidance and encouragement, interpreting his attention as investment in her potential. However, hidden in this benevolent facade is an unsettling truth. The ultimate goal of Mike's manipulation is to consolidate power and compliance, ensuring that Sarah becomes an unknowing pawn in his game of control. Manipulation often thrives in environments rife with ambition and desire for validation, and Sarah becomes increasingly unaware that her aspirations are being hijacked. Winning her trust is merely the preliminary act in Mike's grand theater of influence. He unnervingly expertly shifts from mentor to puppeteer, guiding Sarah's opinions and decisions with subtlety. At first, she feels flattered by his acknowledgement of her hard work. That validation becomes an intoxicating elixir. Yet, as her dependency grows, so too does his capacity for emotional control. Suggestions that appear harmless morph into thinly veiled commands, each propagating compliance further ingrained in her psyche without her conscious awareness. As Sarah immerses herself in the project under Mike's supervision, she becomes entangled in a web of deceit that cloud her judgment. The manipulation takes shape through strategic acts of praise, creating pegs upon which her professional identity hangs. Sarah remains blissfully ignorant of the fact that Mike's intentions stray past mere mentorship into the darker realm of personal domination. The psychological underpinnings of this wretched exchange come alive even more strikingly when viewed against the backdrop of studies illustrating how victims frequently overlook the initial red flags as deception laces their interactions. The thrill of empowerment clouds discernment as emotional rewards mask the warning signs of exploitation. It is a cruel twist of fate that overconfidence, fostered in the name of confidence, blinds Sarah to the encroaching reality. As he reallocates project responsibilities subtly but methodically, her role shifts from creative contributor to a mere executor of his whims. This transition occurs without a significant perceptible change. In fact, Sarah's emotional connection to belief in her capabilities seems stronger than ever. Victims of manipulation often do not recognize their entrapment until it has solidified into a cage of intimacy disguised as support. Over time, vital aspects of their identity and initiative quietly erode under the weight of misplaced loyalty. A pivotal moment arises when Sarah learns that Mike intends to take sole credit for the project's success. In shock, she finally perceives the shadows that surrounded her, highlighting that the support she thought was encouragement had spiraled into an entirely different dimension of control. This piercing realization presents not only a wake-up call, but also introduces the overarching truth many vulnerable victims face. By surrendering their autonomy in pursuit of validation and acceptance, they unknowingly cede their power. Recognizing the depths of psychological manipulation and understanding its various shadows creates clarity for those ensnared. This moment of tumult reveals how often we confuse empowerment with exploitation, vibrancy with manipulation. Awareness, now readily available in the pearlescent light of truth, is essential for breaking free from elaborate cycles of deceit that masquerade as connection and trust. The illusion of control will be dismantled in the next segment, where deeper insights into manipulation's consequences take shape and help empower those with newfound understanding to navigate away from its ties. As Sarah grapples with her stark realization, the emotional turbulence that accompanies being manipulated becomes undeniably evident. The effects of psychological manipulation on an individual's emotions can warp their perception of reality and justify unhealthy dynamics. Victims like Sarah frequently experience a myriad of conflicting feelings, oscillating between guilt, confusion, anger, and anxiety. These emotional shifts create a frail foundation, and as the manipulators artfully exploit this vulnerability, victims often feel a compulsion to placate their abuser, reinforcing a damaging cycle. Psychological research supports this notion, revealing that manipulation can trigger heightened cortisol levels, signifying stress, which contributes to erratic emotional states that compel individuals to compromise their values. The impact of manipulation extends beyond the emotional realm, infiltrating decision-making processes as well. Victims begin to second-guess their instincts, rendering themselves incapable of embracing critical thinking. The cascading effects of such uncertainty reinforce compliance, stifling self-efficacy, and causing individuals to rely on their manipulators for guidance. A powerful illustration of this dynamic is found in the experience of David, a seasoned entrepreneur who, during a partnership with a charismatic fellow investor, found himself increasingly sidelined. The partner, initially a generous mentor, slowed the flow of information pertaining to critical decisions, replacing teamwork with dominance. With every choice, David was stripped of control, his confidence eroded, leading him to an alarming misjudgment regarding impending investments. Such impairments illustrate the pernicious influence manipulation has on cognitive processes, culminating in detrimental business decisions that could cost individuals both financially and personally. Moreover, relationships suffer debilitating consequences from manipulation. Victims learn to elevate the desires of their manipulators above their emotional needs, creating a warped sense of connection. The disconnect leaves an emotional toll where genuine affection transforms into a facade, diluting authentic engagement with shallow, transactional exchanges. Julia and Mark, a couple caught in a toxic cycle of manipulation, serve as a compelling case study. Initially appearing invested in each other, Mark used emotional baiting to mask controlling behaviors. Whenever Julia expressed dissatisfaction, Mark reframed their relationship issues as personal failures on Julia's part, leading her to question her emotional validity. This manipulation inherently trapped her in an unhealthy bond while disallowing true intimacy, illustrating how relational dynamics breed dependence and misery through interference. The underlying psychology driving these cycles stems from a learned reliance on external validation. Research reveals that people often fall prey to manipulation when they seek affirmation of their self-worth, creating a fertile ground for exploiters to sow their seeds of deceit. When individuals intertwine their value with approval or assistance from others, they draw a closer connection to compliance. This bond inculcates a sense of reputational fear of losing the validation that feeds their self-esteem, leading them to overlook undesirable behaviors of their manipulators. Awareness of these dynamics assumes an urgency, as failing to recognize one's entrapment perpetuates cycles of manipulation steeped in emotional obliteration. With every experience of emotional and cognitive dissonance, individuals surrender more of themselves to their manipulators, culminating in a profound loss of autonomy. The severity of such relational deficits calls out for vigilance and insight. To break free from the clutches of manipulation, the understanding of the fundamental traits intertwined with deceptive behaviors becomes paramount. This newfound awareness will pave the way for the next segment, which will delve into the often overlooked warning signs that could alert individuals to potential exploitation before it becomes an irreversible pattern. The urgency to remain vigilant knows no bounds, as the hidden truths dwell beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Manipulators are often adept at identifying their targets, leveraging personal insight and observation to exploit perceived vulnerabilities. They evaluate individual behaviors and emotional landscapes, developing a keen understanding of weaknesses to seize upon. Individuals who deeply desire validation, struggle with low self-esteem, or exhibit social anxiety are prime candidates. Their unmet emotional needs become breadcrumb trails that lead manipulators to recognize who might surrender their power for acceptance, making it crucial to unravel these subtle identification tactics. Consider the case of Mia, a talented artist burdened with self-doubt. She attends a networking event seeking approval from established figures in her field. While interacting, she meets Alex, a charismatic gallery owner who showers her with compliments about her artwork. Initially flattered by his praise, Mia interprets his interest as genuine admiration. However, Alex systematically investigates Mia's background, uncovering her struggles and ambitions, and quickly harmonizes with her emotional vulnerabilities. By mirroring her insecurities and aspirations, he adeptly cloaks his manipulative intentions. Whenever Mia falters in confidence, Alex's reassurance becomes her anchor, despite the creeping sense of unease she ignores until it's too late. As their professional relationship deepens, Mia finds herself slowly ensnared in Alex's web. He proposes collaboration, painting himself as the much-needed mentor. Unsurprisingly, Mia becomes ambassadors of her own artistry, seeding opportunities designed for Alex's benefit. Psychological shifts unfold quietly under this facade. Mia starts doubting her creative decisions, leaning more heavily on Alex's approval. Studies suggest that these dynamics thrive in relationships where emotional dependency fosters an illusion of control and connection. With each concession Mia makes, from altering her style to sidestepping her instincts, Alex solidifies his grip, further inscribing self-doubt within her psyche. The emotional cost of these manipulative strategies is significant. As manipulators ease their way into the psychological fabric of their targets, they induce an array of cognitive distortions that leave victims naturalizing toxic interactions. The continuous dependency that churns beneath the surface serves to unravel one's transferable beliefs, often reshaping identity to match the inflexible framework dictated by the manipulator. Manipulation requires the coerced acceptance of terms. In this case, Mia's decision to concede her artistic vision in favor of Alex's directions leads to internal conflict and dissatisfaction. Typically, manipulators exhibit certain signatures: subtle aggressions, emotional withdrawal, and ambiguous communications, alerting those keen to notice them. Yet, these warning signs frequently elude unsuspecting targets, caught in the intoxicating haze of flattery and approval. Manipulators strategically veil their intentions, rendering transparency almost impossible. This phenomenon risks ensnaring even the most discerning individuals in traps laid with intricate deceit. Understanding these identification techniques is crucial, denoting the first line of defense against manipulation. As knowledge surrounding these smokescreens grows, individuals can start recognizing patterns reminiscent of their own experiences. Awareness of how manipulators target vulnerabilities empowers individuals to break free from cycles of deception and recover their identities. As we journey further along this exploration, the focus will shift toward the escalation of manipulation and the various methods through which victims become irreversibly trapped within destructive cycles. Grasping these concepts will fortify your defenses, allowing you to reclaim autonomy and challenge the dynamics of influence from which you might be suffering. Remember, awareness comes with growth. By learning the unseen tactics, you build a foundation upon which to stand strong against manipulation's echoes. This journey towards self-reclamation has started. Let us continue to dismantle shadows of deception step by step. Chapter 3: The Tug of Control. Imagine a busy office environment where teamwork and collaboration are encouraged, yet beneath the veneer of camaraderie, a toxic undercurrent flows. In this setting, we meet Lisa, a diligent employee who thrives on creating innovative solutions and fostering workplace harmony. However, there's a manipulative presence lurking, a supervisor named Greg who excels in maintaining the facade of support. At first glance, Greg appears to champion Lisa's ideas, frequently offering compliments and encouragement. Yet unbeknownst to Lisa, his ultimate goal is not collaboration, it is control. As Lisa unwittingly shares her aspirations and creative thoughts, Greg quietly absorbs her contributions, molding them to fortify his own agenda, stripping her of both autonomy and self-worth. In this dynamic, Lisa's continued trust in Greg's supposed mentorship blinds her to the creeping entrenchment of manipulation. What begins as a supportive relationship gradually transforms into an exercise of emotional leverage. Greg cultivates an atmosphere conducive to isolation, subtly pitting colleagues against each other while reinforcing Lisa's dependence on his validation. Every interplay dangles an unspoken threat. Without his approval, her professional worth diminishes. Such psychological manipulation fosters a spawning ground for compliance, and over time, Lisa finds herself modifying her behavior and decisions to fit Greg's desires, rendering herself an echo of his will rather than the unique contributor she once aspired to be. The unsettling reality of this manipulation is that victims like Lisa often fail to recognize the extent of their entrapment. The emotional pull of validation roots deeply within, fostering an attachment that is simultaneously comforting and confining. Every compliment intertwined with undertones of insecurity disarms her critical thinking and makes her question her capabilities. Subtle shifts occur in Lisa's demeanor. Her confidence wanes as she internalizes Greg's whims and dismisses her intuitive hesitations. Numerous studies underscore the disarray caused by intermittent reinforcement, a psychological mechanism by which individuals become more compliant when they receive occasional praise, coupled with threads of stress. As the tug of control escalates, the psychological chain tightens around Lisa. Ambiguities and anxieties cloud her perceptions, poisoning her relationships with other team members. Loneliness haunts her, breeding a perception that she is the sole keeper of Greg's convoluted trust and confidence. She believes maintaining this allegiance to him sustains her career, ironically diverting her from the threads of authenticity that once defined her professional path. This dichotomy, where external approval subsumes internal validation, meticulously concocts a reality where conformity feels like survival. The vicious power dynamics exposed by literary and psychological explorations underscore the urgency of recognizing these deceptive strategies. Lisa's journey illustrates not only vulnerability in the face of malice, but also the imaginative workings of emotional manipulation that flower in what seems to be supportive environments. Awareness reveals itself to be a pathway out of control rather than acceptance of fate. The question remains whether we can shatter these intricate composites before entrapment stains our personal goals and values. Understanding the various strings manipulators use to conduct their symphonies of control is imperative. This stealthy play against individual autonomy commands our attention, providing vital insight into recognizing the pernicious tug of control. The nuances in how compliance blossoms from manipulation lay the groundwork for self-preservation. The discourse will progress toward unveiling the mechanisms manipulators use to escalate their dominance, and how victims can find themselves anchored within troubling cycles, directionlessly drifting far from their true selves. Through vigilance and keen awareness, individuals can reclaim their power and forge pathways through manipulation's web, a necessity in an age of pervasive deceit. As Lisa remains caught in the tug of control exerted by Greg, the emotional implications become increasingly pronounced. This environment engenders feelings of anxiety, self-doubt, and confusion. Manipulation is not simply a matter of influence. It strikes at the very core of one's identity, leading victims to question their abilities and emotional responses. The psychological toll of manipulative behaviors is significant. Research has shown that individuals subjected to emotional control experience heightened levels of distress, often resulting in debilitating mental health effects such as depression and anxiety. Lisa, once a vibrant contributor, finds herself struggling to articulate her ideas, paralyzed by the fear of disapproval. The erosion of self-esteem quickly follows suit. Lisa becomes acutely aware of each fleeting favor Greg bestows, intertwining her self-worth with his judgments. Emotional dependence is bred subtly, resulting in a dangerous reliance that distorts her perception of self-valued contributions. Strikingly, studies indicate that manipulation can cause victims to prioritize others' opinions over their own, leading to diminished confidence and increased uncertainty. Lisa's colleagues, once potential collaborators, fade into the background as her worldview narrows. Not understanding Greg's tactics, they inadvertently validate the distance Lisa feels as she gravitates more towards him in a quest for approval. Decision-making is inherently affected as manipulative dynamics deepen. Being under Greg's influence clouds Lisa's judgment. She increasingly weighs her actions in accordance with his preferences. Whether it's redesigning project proposals to align with what he deems acceptable or stifling her creative instincts to avoid confrontation, the toll adds a layer of paralysis to her choices. Facial expressions, body language, and even vocal inflections, as conveyed through Greg's interests, distort her intuitive responses. Research in behavioral psychology underscores that individuals who experience such external control begin to systematically undermine their choices, often leading to decisions that jeopardize their values and ambitions. This diminishment in self-agency sharply outlines why Lisa finds herself falling farther under Greg's grasp. The gray areas of compliance manifest conflict over loyalties and lead to an abdication of authority, making it easier for the manipulator to consolidate control. At this junction, Lisa's increasing estrangement from her colleagues somewhat amplifies the isolation, steering her to feel she is the only one capable of handling Greg's complex favor systems. She is led to falsely believe that any dissent might unravel the fabric of their cooperative endeavor, pushing vulnerable individuals further into solitude as they adopt behaviors incongruent with their true selves. A striking illustration arises from a case study involving Ravi, a graduate student plagued by uncertainty. After being nudged into a mentorship under a domineering professor, he learns to mute critical reflections against their ideas, ultimately sacrificing opportunities for enrichment. The emotional vacuum replaces ambition with self-doubt, showcasing every individual's capacity to remain entrapped in another's dominance simply out of a desire for acceptance and growth. Lisa's experience and Ravi's reveal fundamental insights about the manipulative mechanisms. Such realization structures an urgency undeniably vital to unmasking deceptive patterns capable of undermining someone's decisions, emotions, and relational health. Understanding these tactics not only counters manipulation's hostile grasp, but also fortifies emotional resilience at an individual level. As these revelations infuse clarity into manipulation's overarching tactics, they serve as a critical prelude. Next, we will delve into hidden warning signs, signals easily overlooked, that could be pivotal in preserving one's emotional integrity and autonomy. These indicators are key to breaking free from the relentless grip of control, enabling individuals to reclaim their inner strength and dignity. Forging ahead toward liberation from manipulation ensures that self-agency reigns supreme in every individual's path to empowerment. Manipulators typically identify their targets through keen observation, searching for signs of vulnerability that they can exploit. They possess an uncanny ability to detect emotional weakness, whether rooted in insecurity, the desire for acceptance, or fear of rejection. In a professional setting, for instance, manipulators often focus on individuals who exhibit a high need for approval, such as newcomers or those in lower hierarchical positions. They form psychological profiles based on these traits, honing in on the qualities that signal readiness to comply. Consider the story of Tom, a recent hire in a competitive technology firm. As he navigates his new workplace, Melissa, a senior team member, capitalizes on Tom's eagerness to impress. Melissa approaches him with overt friendliness, asking him personal questions about his ambitions. Tom, naturally inclined to build rapport, shares his career hopes candidly. In this seemingly innocent exchange, Melissa gathers critical information, his challenges and insecurities. Once armed with this emotional intelligence, she can deftly manipulate Tom's ambitions, steering him to pursue options that align with her agenda, sidelining his own preferences and aspirations. As Melissa guides Tom, she uses tactics that subtly shape decision-making. Anytime he offers a creative suggestion during team discussions, she responds with dismissive comments, often undercutting his confidence. This behavior nudges Tom to withdraw his ideas in subsequent meetings, resulting in a striking erosion of his self-assurance. Psychological research supports that such repeated exposure to negative feedback leads to cognitive distortions, where victims misconstrue their abilities and worth. Tom's perception of self begins to tilt chaotically as he internalizes Melissa's dismissal, conditioning him to rely on her for validation and leading to greater compliance over time. These subtle psychological shifts are telling signs of manipulation in action. As individuals like Tom sink into compliance, they often overlook the profound impact of manipulation on their relationships within the workplace. With each decision made in fear of rejection or disapproval, Tom drifts further from his original intent. He starts viewing Melissa not just as a colleague, but as a gatekeeper of his professional success, thus cementing a dependent relationship that bleeds into other facets of his life. When examining the broader implications of this dynamic, it becomes evident how promotion of their personal agenda detracts from collaboration. Employees like Tom, ensnared in this elaborate web, may struggle with forming authentic connections with others, resulting in deeper levels of isolation. As confidant relationships fragment, they become defined by interactions that lack trust and genuine connection, provoking a harmful cycle where each individual seeks approval from those orchestrating deceit. It is critical to grasp the mechanisms through which manipulators identify and take command of their targets. Awareness of these tactics marks the first step toward resistance against manipulation's lurking shadows. By recognizing one's vulnerabilities, individuals can develop defenses against potential manipulative overtures. Insight into these strategies empowers victims to assert their boundaries and reclaim autonomy, regardless of external pressures. As we continue this exploration, the next segment will unpack the ways in which manipulation escalates, revealing how victims inexorably find themselves trapped in the resulting cycles of control. Acknowledging and understanding these underlying patterns serves not only as a safeguard, but also as an essential pillar for personal growth and emotional recovery. Participation in one's own narrative builds resilience against the manipulative behaviors that pervade personal and professional spaces alike. We must remain vigilant as we navigate the complex landscape of relationships to guard against the encroaching grip of deceit. Chapter 4. Breaking the Chains. In a seemingly supportive environment, Emma is the epitome of hard work and dedication. She has always prioritized the needs of her family over her own desires and ambitions, running a bustling home while managing her part-time job. However, among her closest circle lies Rosa, a friend who initially appears supportive. As they indulge in long conversations filled with shared dreams and solutions, a dark undertow flows beneath the surface. Rosa's ultimate goal is not friendship, but emotional control, and she begins to exploit Emma's sense of duty and guilt to manipulate her decisions. Rosa cleverly capitalizes on Emma's core beliefs about family and responsibility. By consistently presenting herself as the voice of reason, she subtly nudges Emma to prioritize the needs of others above her own, persuading her to forego coaching sessions and social events that would fulfill her personal goals. The veneer of friendship offers a false light that masks manipulation, causing Emma to confuse generosity and obligation with love and loyalty. In effect, Rosa constructs a stifling reality, entwining herself in Emma's psyche and undermining her sense of self-efficacy. As time progresses, Emma begins to notice subtle shifts in her emotional landscape. The joy she once derived from her endeavors fades, replaced by a growing sense of frustration and resentment. This sentiment bubbles beneath the surface as she struggles to articulate her discomfort, fearing that her attempts to reclaim her time might shatter the fragile illusion of harmony she shares with Rosa. This is where emotional manipulation often lays its trap. Victims, awash in guilt and uncertainty, overlook the gradual erosion of their boundaries until it becomes a towering cycle of compliance. The chains of manipulation tighten stealthily, and recognition comes far too late. Research substantiates that those ensnared in such dynamics tend to normalize toxic behaviors over time, leading victims to overlook manipulative tactics disguised as concern or friendship. Emma's reticence reflects a broader psychological phenomenon, defined by cognitive dissonance, where upholding a relationship becomes more pivotal than addressing harmful behaviors. The reciprocity of obligation and emotional investment drives her deeper into submission, convincing her that sacrificing her own happiness is a necessary aspect of being a good friend. This compulsion leads victims like Emma to believe that fleeting moments of approval somehow justify the sacrifice of their own aspirations. In contemplating the broader implications, the scenario depicts how individuals become bound within harmful dynamics against their better judgment. Emotional bonds forged under these pretenses diminish clarity and agency. There is a crucial need for awareness and vigilance to identify when such patterns emerge in our relationships, most prominently in those cloaked in love and loyalty. Understanding the mechanisms of guilt and obligation is essential to unraveling the insidious grip manipulative figures can hold over their targets. The striking truth within Emma's narrative reveals shared experiences with countless individuals who confront similar struggles. Many fail to perceive their entrapment until they have already lost their footing. By recognizing the behaviors that signal manipulative tactics, one can begin dismantling these emotional barriers and liberate themselves from their chains. As we advance in our exploration of psychological manipulation, the narrative of liberation and reclamation of self awaits. Embracing the journey toward understanding and breaking free from these bonds is integral to restoring autonomy and personal strength. The next phase will delve deeper into the process of liberation, highlighting the intricate pathways that lead to healing and self-reclamation, empowering individuals to step boldly into their own narratives. It is time to cast light on the shadows and venture forth into a brighter path, unraveling the layers of deceit that obstruct our authentic selves. As Emma grapples with the chains of manipulative behavior woven by Rosa, the emotional repercussions ripple through her decision-making and relationships. The emotional toll she bears mounts steadily. Feelings of guilt, frustration, and inadequacy emerge as pervasive companions. Each time Emma diverts her energy toward fulfilling Rosa's demands, a part of her dwindles. Psychologically, she begins to experience significant cognitive dissonance, a state in which conflicting emotions and beliefs lead her to justify questionable situations rather than confront her inner truth. Research supports the hypothesis that manipulation often engenders a cycle of heightened anxiety and self-doubt. Victims such as Emma might convince themselves that their happiness hinges on complying with a manipulator's whims. The unfavorable emotions that arise result in chronic stress. Psychological studies suggest that these heightened stress levels lead to reduced decision-making capabilities, creating a downward spiral where output quality significantly falters. Emma's choices become dampened by a pervasive fear of judgment and disapproval from Rosa. The passions that once fueled her creativity and drive dissolve in favor of adherence, undermining her self-esteem. As self-esteem wanes, the bonds formed with others fracture, revealing the profound and isolating impact of toxic relationships. Emma's growing dependence on Rosa erodes her social network. Friends who once inspired her begin to fade into oblivion as she pours relationships into the singular mold of her friendship with Rosa. Over time, this leads Emma to believe that her only source of affirmation springs from a relationship hollowed by manipulation. This perception creates emotional barriers that obstruct recognition and acceptance of supportive connections with others. The result is debilitating loneliness, exacerbated by a false sense of loyalty that compels her to question the good faith in her remaining relationships. The case of Nathan provides further insight into this phenomenon. A promising young athlete, Nathan fell in with a group of peers whose big ambitions placed immense expectations upon him. Initially drawn to their camaraderie, Nathan found himself sacrificing training time, hobbies, and healthy friendships in a bid to meet their intricate demands. As the group extended to him shallow praise and feigned concern, he grew increasingly isolated from family and former friends who genuinely cared for his well-being. Nathan's growing obligations created an emotional quagmire where moments of joy became indexed with compliance. Ultimately, like Emma, both Nathan and Emma become shadowy versions of themselves, priorities lost amid the fog of manipulation. Understanding how these emotional dynamics take hold is crucial for mitigating their effects. Awareness emerges as the first step toward breaking free from a cycle of emotional subjugation and reclaiming one's agency. Victims frequently fail to recognize the patterns of manipulation, entrenching them further into realms of uncertainty and self-doubt that shape their sense of identity. Layered tactics perpetuate action and inaction, generating fear and hesitance while dismantling personal power. As we continue to engage in these heartbreaking narratives, it's imperative to unearth the critical warning signs that signal the onset of emotional manipulation. Foreshadowed moments can prove vital in shaping trajectories toward reclaiming agency and rebuilding self-worth. Identifying these subtle shifts, which often go unnoticed, primes individuals to respond preemptively rather than defensively, a pivotal transition that's integral to breaking free from the snares of manipulation. Knowledge prepares the pathway to liberation, igniting a powerful journey to self-acknowledgement and resilience. In understanding both ourselves and the manipulative dynamics at play, we cultivate an environment where authenticity and connection can flourish once more. Manipulators often employ an astute observational skill set to identify their targets. Individuals who are marked by emotional vulnerabilities, anxious tendencies, or a strong desire for acceptance. They sense the undercurrents of insecurity and self-doubt in potential victims, and then craft a dynamic that entices these individuals to lower their defenses. By masquerading as friends or mentors, manipulators can draw out critical information about a target's fears, desires, and weaknesses, using this knowledge as leverage to exert control. For instance, consider the story of Rachel, an introverted college student seeking guidance as she explores her career options. Confident and assertive, Sarah, a senior in the same program, takes an interest in Rachel and offers to mentor her. At first, the relationship feels like a dream. Rachel feels seen and reassured by Sarah's attention and approval. Unbeknownst to Rachel, Sarah astutely observes her reactions and gleans valuable insights into her vulnerabilities. They often engage in conversations where Rachel reveals her fears about failing to secure a job post-graduation and her longing for recognition in a competitive environment. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah subtly begins to shape the narrative, implying that Rachel must adhere closely to Sarah's methods to succeed. As the relationship develops, Rachel finds herself navigating a complex web of emotional manipulation. Sarah starts to impose her own preferences on Rachel, convincing her that pursuing certain opportunities is the only path to success. With each piece of advice, disciplinary feedback becomes a slight against Rachel's worth. This pattern leads Rachel to question herself incessantly, changing ideas and plans to align with what she believes will garner approval from Sarah. Psychological research indicates that exposure to this form of control triggers significant emotional distress, as victims often internalize the manipulator's standards as their own. The underlying cognitive shifts that occur during such manipulative encounters are palpable yet haunting. Rachel starts to alter her behavior, distancing herself from peers who might challenge Sarah's authority or indicate that conformity is unwarranted. The initial excitement of mentorship morphs into trepidation. She begins to second-guess her judgments, abandoning previously held values to fit into the expectations imposed by Sarah. In estranging herself from her circle of friends, Rachel fails to see how companionship and diversity of thought once fortified her independence and self-confidence. Using case studies such as Rachel's illustrates a broader reality where individuals often succumb to patterns of manipulation that preserve a facade of connection but erode authenticity and agency. These experiences highlight how emotional triggers rooted in insecurity, particularly fear of failure, are exploited by others to establish dominance. The victims often walk an involuntary path toward compliance, festooned with the charms of their manipulators, unaware of their emotional and cognitive entrapment. As Rachel's identity continues to dissolve within Sarah's influence, understanding how manipulators uniquely identify and exploit vulnerabilities stands as a pregnant revelation. Knowledge ultimately serves as empowerment. It is paramount to comprehend these intrinsic tactics crafted to render one conforming, enabling decisive action against emotional submission. Transitioning into the complex exploration of escalating control mechanisms, we must remain vigilant. Identifying these subtle manipulations equips individuals to frame responses and resist further entrapment. Butlered by awareness, the journey toward reclaiming emotional autonomy ignites. Discovering the layers of manipulation deepens our resilience and empowers us to cast aside the chains imposed by others. In the forthcoming sections, attention will shift toward how these cycles of manipulation amplify, revealing more critical insights into maintaining personal strength amid entrapment. Understanding and recognizing these elements will be instrumental in reclaiming one's control against the tide of emotional exploitation. Chapter 5: Trust and Vulnerability. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, two mothers, Amy and Claire, connect over shared carpooling duties and weekend soccer games. While initial conversations brim with warmth and mutual support, the nuances of their camaraderie begin to shift. Claire, adept at reading Amy's emotional landscape, instinctively identifies her fears about parenting, work-life balance, and financial stability. Ultimately, Claire's subtle intentions revolve around emotional control. She slathers Amy's confidence with veiled praise, gradually siphoning away her autonomy under the guise of friendship. Throughout their exchanges, Amy's vulnerability becomes an open book, providing Claire with keys to manipulate the narrative of their relationship. At first glance, Amy appreciates the seemingly genuine bond with Claire, but soon she finds herself retreating into a corner, constrained by insecurities that Claire enhances through insidious remarks hidden in friendly banter. "Are you sure that's what you want to do with your time?" Claire casually asks when Amy mentions a potential promotion. That innocuous question looms large, casting shadows of doubt across Amy's aspirations. Each passing conversation leaves Amy walking a tightrope, apprehensive about projecting her true self while presenting an allure of compliance. Slowly, Claire's emotional steering whittles away at Amy's trust in her abilities and intentions, a slow progression that few recognize until it's interwoven tightly around their very essence. As the need for approval intensifies, victims often fail to acknowledge the emotional transactions that characterize such relationships. Amy starts prioritizing Claire's opinions over her own, persuading herself that Claire knows best. This is where emotional manipulation profoundly roots itself, leading victims like Amy to believe that bending to the whims of others is both natural and necessary. Research highlights that individuals often succumb to manipulation because they misconstrue accepting these interferences as deeper indicators of trust and friendship. Ironically, the more they lock into these dynamics, the less they see the manipulation propagating within them. The vulnerability and trust that fill the gap between friendship morph into battlegrounds, allowing manipulators like Claire to exploit weaknesses hidden beneath the surface. Amy becomes ensnared in a loyalty paradox, torn between wanting to extract herself from Claire's grasp and the fear that it will cost her that fragile facade of approval. Empirical studies in social psychology reveal that emotional vulnerability can breed compliance. As individuals repartee through engagements built on emotional inspections, they relinquish their psychological autonomy. Amy's enjoyment diminishes completely as anxieties spill over her choices. As manipulative dynamics deepen, there's a profound realization that exists. The thread of genuine connection fades amidst dependence, steering individuals away from speaking their truths. For Amy, connections that once flourished in trust begin to rot, forming instead within an inkling of uncertainty and subservience. In recognizing these damaging effects, people must arm themselves with the understanding necessary for protection against such manipulation. Vulnerability shouldn't automatically dictate engagement in unhealthy dynamics. Instead, it should mark the outset to intentionality in relationships. Understanding how manipulators exploit trust through emotional vulnerabilities is crucial for safeguarding against potential threats. The reality awakened by Amy's experience, where she mistook compliance for connection, serves as a poignant reminder that discerning the hidden makers of leverage is essential if one is to safeguard their autonomy. As we journey within this landscape of trust and vulnerability, the next segment will peel back layers around the warning signs that are often overlooked. Identifying these signs cultivates discernment and defense against emotional exploitation, enabling individuals to navigate relationships more mindfully and intentionally. This understanding creates a pathway toward a more authentic self, empowering persons to develop and nurture genuine connections built on mutual support rather than manipulation. Embracing this knowledge sets the stage not only for awareness, but for a substantial reclamation of autonomy and emotional health. As Amy continues to navigate the emotional treachery set in motion by Claire, the impact of this manipulative relationship becomes increasingly pronounced. Emotions that once were vibrant and constructive instead develop into an undefined sense of inadequacy. Each subtle jab dressed as advice injected by Claire amplifies self-doubt within Amy's psyche. Psychological research indicates that emotional environments, especially negative ones, can significantly influence a person's self-image and emotional regulation. Consequently, Amy finds herself spiraling into emotional distress. Each encounter chips away at her ability to maintain a cohesive identity, leaving her clutching at fragments of her former self. The intersections of emotional manipulation profoundly affect decision-making as well. Amy experiences turmoil each time she considers a career-boosting opportunity. Claire's seemingly courteous suggestions, such as, "Would that really fit your family's needs?" infiltrate the recesses of Amy's reasoning. While these conversations may give the appearance of genuine concern, they also create a mental space cluttered with fear, driven by judgment and the unknown. Research shows that emotional manipulation can lead victims to overthink decisions, stifling their instincts and ability to strategically assess potential avenues. As choices become heavily influenced by fear of reproach, Amy increasingly finds herself withdrawing from opportunities she once passionately pursued. Relationships, too, suffer in the wake of this manipulative influence. As Amy shields herself from judgment and betrayal, layers of isolation accumulate. Friends who were once part of her support system start to drift away as she becomes plugged into Claire's psychologically toxic orbit. The most alarming aspect of this deterioration is that Amy fails to recognize the erosion of trust and vibrancy in her connections. Instead, she remains ensnared in compliance with Claire, eager for any glimpses of affirmation delivered through virtual strings of manipulated friendship. This isolation perpetuates a cycle of dependence, trapping Amy further beneath Claire's emotional control and obliterating her connections with potential allies who could provide genuine support. Additionally, Amy's self-esteem is at a heightened risk during this manipulative engagement. The constant comparison fostered by Claire leads Amy to gauge her worth solely based on Claire's standards. The undercurrents of inferiority drown out her individuality. She adopts beliefs asserting that her inherent value is contingent on the level of acceptance she receives from Claire. Mindsets saturated by comparison and competition undermine fulfillment in authentic relationships. Research from social psychology highlights how self-esteem can deteriorate when linked solely to external validation, which ultimately renders oneself vulnerable to emotional exploitation. Understanding how these dynamics play out is of utmost urgency. Many people find themselves falling into manipulative traps because the initial bedrock of trust misleads them to ignore incongruities over time. The unsettling fact remains that victims often remain unaware of their entrapment until they are deep within the thicket of emotional bondage. Allowing themselves to gauge worth through skewed perceptions perpetuates the cycle of control imposed by the manipulator. As we expand our discussion into the realm of emotional vulnerability and its association with trust, the forthcoming section will shed light on crucial warning signs that are often overlooked. Recognizing these signs is vital. It fortifies individuals with insights that help dissect manipulative appearances masked behind the veneer of camaraderie and affection. Awareness sets the groundwork for reclaiming personal autonomy and reestablishing healthy relationships rooted in genuine support rather than coercion. Being astute to the many dimensions of manipulation is key to rising above and embracing a sturdy self-identity, allowing healing and connection to flourish beyond toxic ties. This journey of realization refines emotional resilience and empowers individuals in their quest for authenticity in relationships. Manipulators possess an acute ability to identify their targets through careful observation and analysis of emotional vulnerabilities. They are often skilled at honing in on individuals who exhibit signs of low self-esteem, emotional fragility, or a strong need for validation. By observing interactions, they quickly assess who can be coaxed into compliance, using this insight to manipulate the situations to their advantage. This is exceedingly prevalent in environments that prioritize social cohesion, such as workplaces and close-knit communities, where relational dynamics can skew perceptions of trust and approval. Consider the case of Mark, a junior developer at a tech company, who finds himself in a mentorship relationship with Lisa, a senior developer. Initially, Mark feels grateful for her guidance and encouragement, as Lisa wields her experience like a beacon of light. However, her intentions soon come to light. Lisa subtly leverages Mark's insecurities regarding his role in the company as a means to establish control. She identifies her target by observing Mark's eagerness to please and protect his position, deftly unpacking personal stories that communicate his fears about job stability and perfectionism. With every meetup, Lisa subtly undermines Mark's confidence, leading him to abandon ideas but also to question his own skills in favor of her input. The psychological changes in Mark become progressively revealed as he begins to adopt a passive stance, slowly distancing himself from his creative instincts and ideas. Decision-making intricacies subtly shift to comply with Lisa's directives, pushing him to seek her approval before engaging in projects or proposing innovative solutions. Emotional manipulation leads victims like Mark to internalize messages asserting that their own judgments are flawed, while embracing the opinions of their manipulators as guiding principles. The emotional toll of this dynamic manifests in chronic anxiety and a persistent feeling, driving a wedge between genuine self-expression and enforced conformity. Further complicating the situation, those subjected to emotional manipulation often find that their relationships outside the manipulation become strained. Mark's connections with colleagues fade as he becomes more reliant on Lisa for validation, isolating him from support systems that once empowered him. A study in social psychology highlights how such relational dependencies foster dependency rather than independence, reinforcing the manipulator's grip on their target. As Mark's social circle narrows, he finds solace predominantly in Lisa's opinions and becomes increasingly apprehensive of collaborating with others, fearful of being judged or inadequately supported. The process of identifying and exploiting emotional templates among manipulators is a critical component of their technique. Over time, as victims' self-assessments are altered through coercive pressures, their psychological independence wanes. Their identity becomes intertwined with the expectations set by their manipulators, leading to a fearful surrender of self-agency. Much like Mark, many individuals embroiled in similar circumstances find themselves grappling with cognitive dissonance. They struggle to reconcile how a relationship they once cherished has devolved into contention. Understanding the dynamics at play in manipulating interpersonal relationships requires a vigilant eye. The ability to recognize patterns such as unwarranted dependency, emotional isolation, and diminished self-worth prepares victims to defend against the subtle insurgents of manipulation that permeate their lives. As we move forward into the next section, we will unpack the escalation of manipulation and how victims become ensnared in cycles of control. Recognizing these elements not only empowers individuals to counter emotional exploitation, but also cultivates insight into achieving a healthier identity and developing resilient relationships free from the sway of manipulators. Knowledge becomes a powerful ally, allowing individuals to reclaim agency and promote healthy engagement in their connections. Tracking the footprints of manipulation enriches the toolkit needed to rise above and foster authentic interactions, ultimately rendering emotional strength that can navigate through relational turbulence. Chapter 6. Reclaiming Personal Power. Picture this. Sarah, a once confident university student with dreams of becoming a writer, sits in her bedroom surrounded by stacks of books filled with her half-written stories. Drenched in self-doubt, she glances at her phone, seeing countless messages from Mark, a charismatic but manipulative friend who has taken a keen interest in her aspirations. Although their bond initially appeared supportive, Mark's ultimate goal has gradually unfolded into one of emotional control and exploitation. He subtly critiques Sarah's talents, often couching his feedback in the guise of helpfulness. Phrases like, "I just thought you should know," linger over her creativity like an ominous shadow, drowning her spirit as he interjects doubt into her once vibrant ambitions. Mark's method of manipulation hinges on exploiting Sarah's vulnerabilities, knowing well that her yearning for approval renders her susceptible to his influence. As he cloaks derision in the flattery of seeming guidance, Sarah finds herself paralyzed, caught in a loop of self-questioning. The insidious nature of Mark's tactics shifts her sense of identity, causing the vibrant person she once was to dim beneath the weight of unneeded scrutiny. This emotional control fuels Mark's ascent in Sarah's life. The more he distances her from her aspirations, the more power he acquires over her choices. Initially positioned as confidants, their relationship morphs into one of dominance and dependency. SP psychological research illustrates that victims of manipulation frequently alter their decision-making processes in response to the encouragement they receive or lack thereof. For Sarah, this alteration could emerge in her hesitance to submit her short stories to contests or share her writings with others. Each time she considers taking a step toward her goals, she hesitates, remembering Mark's comments that have eroded her confidence like a silent tide carrying her ambitions further out to sea. The emotional ramifications of Mark's manipulation foreshadow vulnerabilities in Sarah that extend beyond simple self-doubt. The gradual disintegration of her self-esteem leads her into a realm of isolation. As she subtly withdraws from her supportive network of friends and peers due to her insecurities, Sarah also sacrifices potential sources of encouragement that might have bolstered her creative endeavors. Retreating into silence enables Mark to thrive. His shadow looms larger over her aspirations, and Sarah mistakenly begins to believe that distancing herself from her friends is necessary. Listening to Mark erodes Sarah's belief in herself further, creating cognitive dissonance, where she withholds her rightful drive toward her goals, due to conflicting emotions and external pressures. The trust that once allowed her to dream becomes the very mechanism that reinforces her entrapment, the charming facade of friendship veiling an emotional prison. This quiet manipulation disrupts her personal power, rendering Sarah powerless. As we dissect Sarah's story, it emerges that understanding these patterns of manipulation becomes paramount for reclaiming one's agency and personal power. Recognizing subtle tactics that target emotional vulnerabilities creates pathways within victims to protect themselves from further exploitation. As the facade begins to fall away, individuals can resurrect their authentic aspirations amid manipulation's intense grip. Yet this journey toward reclamation requires not just awareness but actionable commitment. In the subsequent sections, we will examine steps necessary to reclaim personal power and revive individual ambition. Addressing the complex layers entwined with manipulation provides insight into forging a renewed sense of identity and purpose. By understanding the mechanisms at play, not only can individuals prevent themselves from becoming ensnared again, but they can also fortify their resilience, enhancing their potential for personal growth in environments that once diminished them. It's time to unlock the doors stifling our identities and spark a curious endeavor toward validation and authentic self-expression once more. As Sarah becomes increasingly ensnared in Mark's emotional web, the implications of this manipulation extend deep into her emotional landscape, decision-making capabilities, and overall self-esteem. The psychological impact of emotional control is profoundly pervasive. It stifles personal growth and breeds a thriving environment for self-doubt. Each encounter with Mark leaves Sarah grappling with conflicting emotions, an instinctual longing for connection overshadowed by the suffocating weight of inadequacy he expertly orchestrates. Psychological research reveals that emotional manipulation leads to elevated levels of anxiety and depression, as individuals often internalize negative experiences and projections. Hence, Sarah feels her dreams slipping further away as each persuasive comment from Mark echoes in her mind, sowing seeds of insecurity. This emotional turmoil greatly affects Sarah's decision-making. No longer able to trust her instincts, she second-guesses every impulse and creatively inspired idea. For instance, if she contemplates submitting an article to her university's publication, Mark's voice creeps in, reminding her that previous attempts didn't hit the mark. As Sarah's uncertainty deepens, her aspirations wither. Rather than moving forward with her ideas, she withdraws and rationalizes her inaction as a form of practicality. Research has consistently shown that when people consistently seek validation from others instead of trusting their insight, their ability to make autonomous decisions erodes. Once vibrant visions of her passion for writing become surreptitiously eclipsed by Mark's manipulative influence, a pattern familiar to many who fall prey to similar emotional predators. Moreover, the manipulation deeply fractures Sarah's relationships with others. Isolated from her potential sources of affirmation and support, she forgoes time with close friends who could provide encouragement. The resistive force of self-doubt mounts as she convinces herself that her creativity isn't worthy of audience or esteem. Real-life case studies often illustrate this trajectory. Victims find themselves withdrawing from relationships that were once sources of validation, fearing judgment or ridicule from anyone who might shine light on their vulnerabilities. This trend consolidates the hold manipulative figures, like Mark, have over their targets. Sarah's dependency on his perspective becomes the cornerstone of her self-worth at the expense of nurturing connections that could fortify her. In a devastating turn, Sarah's self-esteem takes a significant hit as the continual belittlement manifests into unconsciously accepting Mark's distortions of her identity. Internalizing these messages leads to an erosion of confidence and pushes her to view herself solely through Mark's lens, a reflection marred by critical comparisons and smothered potential. Studies affirm that self-worth heavily correlates to external feedback. Thus, Sarah's sense of value becomes chained to Mark's approval. As emotional strings tighten, victims may justify unhealthy dynamics as exclusive friendships. Yet understanding that such dependencies mirror a refusal to accept oneself allows for pathways out of the emotional abyss. Recognizing the psychological depth of caring relationships tainted by manipulation is critical in dismantling their entrapment. For those like Sarah, understanding this dynamic lays the groundwork for reclaiming personal power. Empowerment emerges not just from realizing one has fallen under emotional control, but also from the ability to take actionable steps to view life through a new lens, one anchored in self-confidence and authenticity. Stepping forth toward detachment from these toxic exchanges allows individuals to rediscover their identities and realign with their ambitions. As we transition into the next section, we will delve into the hidden warning signs of manipulation that often remain unnoticed or underestimated. Gaining insight into these signs provides individuals with the necessary tools to defend against emotional exploitation. Equipped with this knowledge, you can emerge stronger, recommitting to an authentic self beyond the clutches of emotional predators, ultimately leading the journey toward renewed confidence and clarity. Understanding and recognizing manipulation in its various forms paves the way for self-discovery and empowerment, essential for nurturing genuine connections moving forward. Manipulators possess a keen ability to identify their targets through a meticulous observation of character traits and emotional vulnerabilities. They often look for individuals who exhibit signs of insecurity, desperation for approval, or a desire for connection. These characteristics become the groundwork upon which manipulation flourishes. In many instances, manipulators create a facade of support and camaraderie, drawing in their targets under the guise of friendship, only to erode their confidence and autonomy over time. To illustrate this, consider the case of Jessica, a young marketing professional eager to prove herself in a competitive environment. She crosses paths with Charlotte, a seasoned colleague who exudes confidence and expertise. Initially, Jessica feels flattered by Charlotte's interest in mentoring her. Charlotte swiftly identifies Jessica's need for validation and employs emotional manipulation to cement control. During their interactions, Charlotte often alternates between praise and criticism, making it increasingly difficult for Jessica to discern genuine encouragement from methods of intimidation. This duality becomes a profound mechanism. Jessica learns to dim her own opinions in favor of Charlotte's suggestions, fearing that any dissent might result in criticism or estrangement. As this pattern unfolds, Jessica begins to experience significant psychological shifts. The initial excitement of receiving mentorship morphs into chronic anxiety about her performance and worth, reshaping her decision-making processes. No longer anchored in self-confidence, she weighs her contributions against Charlotte's judgments, contorting her ideas in an attempt to align wholly with Charlotte's vision of success. The detrimental reliance on external approval culminates in a lack of originality, as Jessica becomes trapped in a cycle of confirming herself to Charlotte's standards rather than nurturing her individual perspective. Research in psychology highlights this phenomenon, noting how individuals in such dynamics may develop heightened anxiety and diminished self-esteem when subjected to conditional support from authority figures. Moreover, these manipulative tactics undeniably affect Jessica's relationships beyond her interactions with Charlotte. As she becomes more entrenched in this twisted alliance, her friendships external to the office begin to fade. Jessica prioritizes her bond with Charlotte over supportive networks that once allowed her to stand confidently in her own skin, thereby creating isolation. The slow withdrawal from these connections, born from a deep-seated fear of judgment or validation through performance, confines her to the echo chamber Charlotte has created. Research underscores the connection between emotional manipulation and social withdrawal, showcasing how isolating oppressive relationships can have an overarching impact on an individual's social fabric. The emerging psychological shifts within Jessica lead her to perceive herself exclusively through the lens of Charlotte's opinions, an exceedingly dangerous transformation. As she internalizes doubts and validations delivered conditionally, her original aspirations and creative voice crumble under the weight of someone else's desires. A study concerning power dynamics within relationships illustrates that manipulation can lead to learned helplessness, where victims stop believing in their autonomy and experience a profound sense of loss and resignation. Recognizing the indicators of targeted manipulation and the intricate tactics manipulators employ becomes critical for fostering personal empowerment and maintaining autonomy. Decode the patterns. Manipulators often exploit vulnerabilities through multifaceted feedback that redefines perceptions of self-worth, while others may tiptoe around criticism to inflate their own importance. Unpacking these themes reveals how deeply rooted emotional control influences individuals as they become ensnared in toxic cycles. As we proceed further into this discussion, we will illuminate the escalation of control mechanisms that enable manipulators to tighten their grip over their targets. It's crucial to discern these patterns in order to reclaim personal strength and chart a course towards resilience. By developing an acute awareness of manipulative tactics, individuals can safeguard their emotional agency, paving the way for healthier relationships rooted in authenticity and mutual respect. Arming oneself with comprehension and discernment enables liberation from psychological entrapments, ultimately steering back towards self-realization and personal integrity. In Mind Armor, Defending Against Machiavellian Behavior, we have explored the insidious nature of psychological manipulation and its profound effects on emotions, decision-making, and relationships. Through a series of real-life examples, we unveiled the intricate methods manipulators use to exploit vulnerabilities, ultimately leading to emotional entrapment. Understanding these dynamics is essential for reclaiming personal power and fostering healthy connections free from manipulation's grip. Thank you for investing your time in this journey of discovery and empowerment. We invite you to like, comment, and subscribe to Stealth Psychology for more insights and strategies to protect yourself and thrive.